definitely
What's that?
unscathed.
Pussycat. Whoa, 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 whoa. Pussycat, pussycat, I love you. Where are you? Whoa, 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 whoa. How's the audio, by the way? Because somebody told me the other day that it keeps like when I know I can't really talk like this. It's gonna cut out and stuff, but like, is it clear now? I made a couple of adjustments. Audio's perfect, Mel. It's always perfect. I think I just hit go live for no reason, just to say hi. I didn't really have a purpose to come on. There's a fire, so I said, you know what, F it. And it's been going on for a while, but my mother came over, and so I was like eating with Maddie and hanging out. So this fire's been going for a while now. I don't know how long. Let's see if there's any information on the website. A brush fire erupted in the rural county or community west of Paris in Riverside County Tuesday afternoon, destroying several structures and vehicles. The juniper fire was reported around 2:30 p.m. in the area of Santa Rosa Mine Road and El Nido Road, and rapidly spread to 15 acres. Wow. Mandatory evacuations were ordered for homes south of Santa Rosa Mine Road and east of Vaquero Road. Damn, they got some jacked up pictures here. Wow. That thing is burning. Burning, 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 burning. I'm thinking of rolling, rolling. Rolling, 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 rolling. You're an hour away, you don't see smoke? It's a psyop, man. This is green screen? Watching green screen. It's a distraction, man, for Biden and all this other stuff, right? By the way, the Trump audio files came out, man. CNN somehow got an exclusive Trump with regards to the secret documents. They got his audio, man. I was like, damn. Them boys are recording his ass. I was just watching Erpair, how you doing? How's the baby? How's the hubby? I was just watching members' videos since I was gifted a membership. Oh, make sure you check out the LSD story. Check that one out. California, if so, let it burn. That's not nice. I've been kind of sick the last couple days. Somewhat, like congested. I've been taking Mucinex. And I've been putting some Vicks. I feel like I'm getting better and better, but sometimes the cough starts acting up. And I'm working on a video, by the way. I'm editing some video. So, but it's going to take me a while to put it together. It's not going to be out today. I hope I can finish it tonight. I'm feeling kind of lazy, though. I'm 13 minutes in to the video. I barely started editing yet. But I am working on a story, an old story update, but like, it's taking quite a bit to put it together. So I am doing something. It feels weird, though. Like, I think I've only been gone a couple days, right? Has it even been a couple days? I don't know, like 2 days or some shit. 2 days in, I feel like guilty and stuff. Premier of the Alberta, Canada said 175 fires being investigated for arson 2 weeks ago. Ooh. Well, them, what do you call it, Antifa? They had some pretty big fires.
They very well could. They could do that, but I think they feel that the water could be used elsewhere. The
Oh.
majority of the smoke, the embers that are burning up or floating up from that fire there, is going over this area that's already burned. The concern is up further on that hillside, but at this point, you can see how it's really staying away from the properties for the most part. It's kind of splitting the difference between the two properties on either side. So I think they're going to use those water resources.
A lot of Warm Heart said, anyone else had that Cash App problem that's like everywhere? I heard about that. I need to check my account. I heard that they were double charging people. Like, let's say you make one Cash App payment, they're double charging your account. I need to go check my shit too. I don't know. Maddie's amazing. Grandma was just here. Grandma brought over food. Grandma came over yesterday and she brought over soup and tea. And then she came over today and bought rice and beans and chicken and vegetables. And then she was talking about, like, she told me today, like, have I thought about getting a real job? I was like, what? I was standing here. I was like, Ma, I'm not going back. I mean, unless I somehow, like, things go really, really, really bad. I don't plan on being a pharmacy tech again. But she was telling me, like, for insurance purposes. But, I don't know, bro. I can't see myself doing that. She was like, oh, you can go 2 or 3 days a week. I was like, I was miserable. That job was misery. Yeah. There were some good points, but there was also a lot of misery. The last job I had was actually pretty good. The auditing job, where we took back thousands of dollars from pharmacies every time they screwed up. That was a cool job in the office. They fixed it today? The Cash App thing? I gotta make sure, bro. If someone near me said a car wash was double charged on her Cash App. Damn. I better check, bro. I better go check my account. Melvin, how about you get the real job? It's like, what?
Pedro and Sam, we were in the area. We were over at Lake Elsinore for another story when we spotted this fire first break out. We flew over here. It took us about 3 or 4 minutes to get here. And there were no fire assets at that point. I could tell you that the fire that we saw was started right here. This is along Santa Rosa Mine Road.
The last one was maybe one of the best paying ones that I had. That pharmacy job, I think it was like 20 something an hour. The last pharmacy job I had. There was one before that a couple of years ago that I was making 20 something too, but it was after a long period of time. That last one I just started out at 20 something. The insurance wasn't as great, but like I was off every holiday, which was so much better than the hospital thing. You got to alternate holidays. You got to alternate weekends. I was off every weekend, off all the holidays. Sometimes we got bonuses. Day shift, which was really good because of Maddie. There was a lot more flexibility. When I was at the hospital, I was working afternoon shift and graveyard shift for a while. So yeah, I can't see they treated me like shit. Not the office job, the last one, but the other ones. Oh, they run you into the ground. You're lucky if you get a lunch break. You don't know how many. I actually walked out of one job, one of the first hospital jobs. I walked out of that shit, but they asked me to come back, and I did. I'm surprised. I thought I was done for. And then the job after that, I almost walked out a couple of times. And then when I put my resignation in, they asked me to stay, but I was like, hell nah. Hell nah. I'm out of this shit.
Building was spared, but here's the extent of the burn scar right now. You see some of the aircraft overhead that are still working the fire. You can see the fire retardant lines around the burn scar itself, and it looks like for the most part they
Jennifer says, "Does my mom really have an accent?" She has a little bit of an accent.
The majority of the fire is coming from these two properties that are
because even lost. Maddie's mother, when we joke around and she talks about her mother, she kind of puts a little bit of an accent. So I think she has a little bit of an accent. I don't know what this is. This is here, according to the website here, KTLA. Let me see. What's burning now? They said.
Yeah, that's right, Pedro. In fact, if the winds were to shift, that would be a problem for that property as well as this one up the hill. Now, fortunately, though, the fire did spread past El Nido Road, but they were able to control the fire here. They put a couple of fire retardant drops on this property itself, saving that RV there, and ground crews are there putting out the remainder of the hot spots on that hillside. But at this point, I believe that it's up to about 10 to 15 acres that burned here so far. The good news is the fire, it looks like, is mostly in control. Looks like we got a little hot spot up at the top of the hill here that the helicopter crews are trying to work to knock down. They'll probably come in and put a fire retardant drop there. But for the most part, if the winds continue to push in this direction, there's not a whole lot out in that direction as far as structures
my mom
goes.
was a pharmacist. She said it was so miserable. No breaks.
Property there.
Yeah, they treat you,
top right of your
depending
screen,
where
but
you
it
go.
looks like that's safe for now. But again,
They treat you like
scary
shit.
situation.
Like if you're looking at CVS, bro, they ran me into the ground. Into the ground, bro. I'm not saying they're all like that, because my favorite pharmacy to go to if I have to get something is Publix. Like Publix pharmacy, they always seem like relaxed. They're all smiling and shit. Like they never seem really stressed out, really. CVS is like always backed up. I think their store kind of sucks too, and I used to work there for 5 years. I think they're always out of stock. Their pharmacies run like crap. To crisp. All that dry air over there. Deanna, what's up?
Sam, yes, I did see some firefighters, in fact, in this area here early on, setting a backfire so that the fire would stop progressing to the left-hand side of the screen towards those homes. So, yes, they did set some backfiring or had some backfiring operations. This might be one here as well. Let's see. We'll push in and see if that's just a fire that got out of control or if they actually set a no, I think they're going to put that out. So that's fire that just picked up just recently here. That's not a backfiring operation. But yes, we did see a little bit of that happening. For the most part, though, look at the burn scar here. 50 acres, they're saying, in total, and it looks like they definitely have an upper hand on this, but they can't turn their back to it. If the wind shifts at all, they could have problems, and it could move in different directions. But for the most part, it looks like they are definitely getting a handle on this.
Man, I haven't worked out like in 5 days. I feel like disgusting. I might go after the stream just to go for a little bit. We do need a chase. We're overdue for a chase. Chase in a fire. I went on this crazy, insane rabbit hole last night. I was up till like 4 a.m. last night, watching all these like messed up underwater videos. What do they call that? Those divers too. They call those divers. There's some special underwater, deep water divers. I call them suction divers. Deep water divers. Those guys that go under the rigs and like place the tubing and all that shit. Suction driver. What do they call them? The pressurized divers. Let me see. Trying to find that shit. Saturation divers. There we go. Holy moly. Holy moly. Saturation divers. That thing is so crazy what those guys do. And they pressurize them in some sort of container. What do they call that? I forgot what they call it. A well or a bell. They have this container. There's so many interesting documentaries. They have this container. They put them in this thing and it like pressurizes them slowly over time to what the depth would be down there. And then they're like, I guess they put them in there and then they work different shifts and they stay under the water for like a month. And when they switch shifts, they just stay pressurized instead of having to come up and down all the time. They get paid a lot of money. It's one of the most dangerous jobs, but there have been accidents in the past too. There was one accident where like all 4 of them, I think they imploded. Some guy screwed up the hatch.
Hearing about another one in Redlands.
Some guy screwed up the hatch.
Did you hear anything about it?
I don't know if it was really the guy because it was missing some safety features. There's literal pictures of their organs.
Copy that.
There's like a PDF document I found last night.
We're too steep on this, and You need to reposition.
I think they're saying it was one of the worst diving accidents. But I saw a bunch of it, especially like deep cave or cave diving is really dangerous too. There was this other guy named Yuri Lipsky. You ever seen this Yuri Lipsky shit? This guy filmed his own death because he was diving, and he was a diving instructor. I think he was 21 or 22 years old. Yuri Lipsky. It was really sad, actually. This was creepy as hell, man. This shit. He goes into the water. He somehow starts going to the deep part. I don't know if it was on purpose or not. And I don't know if, I guess they have to wade divers. Something called weighted. I don't know. This guy somehow gets into the deep end. He starts going further and further deep. And he's like, once you start going deep, you have to have a different type of oxygen mix. He went out there with a regular oxygen mix. They're supposed to have like, I think it's oxygen, nitrogen, and then the deeper you go, helium, like a 3 combination. And so this guy, I don't know what happened to him. It is so effing creepy. And he just couldn't get back up. He couldn't float back to the surface.
Okay.
I guess at some point he drops the camera.
Okay.
He's probably confused too because I forgot what they call it when you get that deep and you don't have the appropriate oxygen. You get confused and all that kind of shit. So freaking crazy. And he was lost in I forgot the name of that place. It's a popular dive site that's also a deadly dive site. They believe like 130 to 200 people have died there before.
Now, don't get.
Bro, I mean, I was going for hours last night. This is the most dangerous site in the world. But they still go diving there because they can't help themselves. This guy's scary, interesting, is really good. They can't control themselves, so they have to go.
Is the blue hole in the Red Sea in the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt. It's one of many of these blue holes around the globe, but this one is considered to be by far the most dangerous. And as I'm sure you'll see, this is only highlighted by some of the horrifying incidents that have taken place.
Creepy as hell. You know the messed up thing about that story is that, so they went to recover his body, and the guy that recovered his body, I think his name was Tark, because the mother wanted his body recovered. They recover his body. They find the GoPro thing. I think it was a GoPro. Actually, I shouldn't say that it was a GoPro. It was an underwater camera. They were surprised that it was still functional because it wasn't meant to go that depth, but it was. And so the guy gives the mother the camera. They put it in. They didn't think it was going to work, but apparently they find this video on there. And she sees her son's own death on camera. Like, they don't show him dying, but you know that's the very moment before he dies. And so yeah, and the guy that gave her the camera wished that if he said if he would have known, he would have never given it to her. He would have messed up the camera himself. So pretty messed up, jacked up stuff, man. Is that New Jersey where they keep dying? This one is there's one in Texas too. There was a really interesting docu on this other place in Texas. So this one here, this blue hole, Red Sea, is in the peninsula of Egypt. And then this other place is in Texas. It's called Jacob's Well. And the story behind that is crazy as shit too. Multiple people have died there. And these divers, they can't help themselves. They have to keep going back to explore because they want to get to the furthest, deepest chambers in this. Let's see which one shows the chambers. Right here. First, second, third chamber. There's even more. There's a fourth. There's a fifth. I think there might even be a sixth. What happens is when you get to the bottom, it thins out.
Or back and preparing to perform, dropped into the narrow opening to the fourth chamber, hoping that it would help them find their way back. With that, they were also traveling deeper in, meaning that the rate that they'd be consuming air would be quicker. And so soon enough, he checked his gauges and realized that if he was low on air, their situation would be much, much worse. In a last effort, he banged on his tanks when the back was done.
There's 3 friends that go down there, and they knew about this spot, but he wasn't going to go. The 2 other friends, in order to wedge yourself into this, I think, 4th chamber, the only way you can go is if you take off your scuba tank, and then you have to wedge yourself with the scuba tank shit. So his 2 friends that had less oxygen than him, they go in there. And that wasn't like, they didn't even talk about that before. They just go, I guess they're curious. So this guy's watching him. He's like, fuck that. I'm not going in there.
Dive knife to try to signal them. And then, before he was too low on air, he grabbed his light and dropped it into the narrow opening to the 4th chamber, hoping that it would help them find their way back. With that, he turned around and made his way to the surface, not knowing whether they were alive or dead. This was unfortunately made clear to him as he sat on the water's edge, pulling off his gear when the water turned a deep murky brown. This meant that either they were panicked and kicking up massive amounts of silt, or there had been a cave-in or a gravel slide. Either way, Joe was pretty sure that Kent and Mark wouldn't be coming back. Several hours later, rescuers were on the scene and preparing to perform a body recovery. Even by the time they'd arrived, the remaining group members had been in and out of the water, searching desperately for the 2 men, and by then they were all exhausted and in shock, and they still hadn't seen any sign of Kent or Mark. As the recovery team stood at the water's edge, they contemplated going in right away or waiting until morning. From what they were told by Joe and the others, it didn't seem like it would be that difficult to rescue, and it would be dark in the cave whether it was morning or night. But the man in charge of the rescue, Don Dibble, was still unsure of the condition, so he sent down 2 divers to assess and see if they could even locate the bodies. What they found was that not only could they not find them, but that the opening to the 4th chamber was almost completely closed off.
There's the 4th chamber there. So these guys squeezed between there. Now when they go back to investigate, it's like it's closed off. I don't know if they got trapped in there or what. Later on, some other group of scuba divers, come exploring, and they do find in another chamber, they find extra scuba tanks.
Gravel. They eventually returned to the surface and told Don about how bad it was, and that's when he made the decision to wait until the following day to have a bigger crew and better equipment. At around 10 a.m., they were back on the scene with a full team, and pretty quickly, divers were in the water with trowels, attempting to clear some of the gravel and widen the opening. Unfortunately, this seemed to do almost the exact opposite. With every push, more gravel seemed to slide in and take the place of any pushed away. After several hours of little progress, Don decided to go down for himself and see if he had any better ideas. On his way down, he dropped a spare tank at the bottom of the 1st chamber, then at 75 feet at the bottom of the 3rd, while also running a safety line the entire way.
And that's the thing that I've seen as like a tactic, I guess. That I've watched a couple of these cave or like dangerous dive videos. Sometimes they'll drop like spare tanks along the way. So in case some shit goes down and they're using way more oxygen than they have to, on the way back, they have these like safety, an extra spare tank or whatever that they can use.
He swam
and the other thing
horizontally.
too is using the rope to go in so you know your way out. Because sometimes like they call it silt happens, which is really bad, which will obscure your vision if somebody's kicking up sand or some sort of cave in or whatever, and you can't see anything visually. You can, or if you get disoriented, you know, by I forget what they call it, what kind of poisoning. Is it? I forgot with the air oxygen thing.
Across the 3rd chamber, he and the other diver he was with scanned the ceiling in case the bodies had floated upward. Finally, they made it to the entrance to the 4th chamber, which was in fact covered by a large pile of gravel. He then checked his pressure gauge and saw that he had about 10 minutes of air left, so he decided to see if he could take a look into the 4th chamber and see anything. He then grabbed his safety line and held onto it as he sort of wedged his head and shoulders into the crevice. Unfortunately, he couldn't really see much other than the occasional piece of gravel kicked up by the water current. And right as he realized what he was seeing, he had a split second of panic as he realized that the current and his body could dislodge this large mass of gravel. And basically,
there have been people. There was this other story that I was watching last night. There was these people that went down in an underwater cave, actually in Florida, and the thing collapsed on itself, and they were stuck for a while. But then one of the guys They both kind of wedged through, but one guy died. So like that stuff kind of happens too.
As the thought went through his head, his torso and arms were pinned in place. In just a second, the entire area was completely silted out, and his arms were so stuck that he couldn't grab his safety line. He also couldn't signal to the diver who'd come in with him, nor could the other diver see in all of the silt. Don, being the expert that he was able to stay calm, but he could feel his breathing rate increase as he exerted more and more energy trying to free his body from the gravel. Then, horrifyingly, he took a breath and no air came through his regulator. He pulled again and nothing, and then water started to enter his mouth. The sudden realization of what was happening caused him to spasm involuntarily, and this was so violent that it freed his arms, and then a split second later, he was met with a regulator being shoved into his mouth by the other diver. He immediately inhaled almost as violently, and in doing so, swallowed about half the large breath he took.
This shit is so crazy too. Check this shit out. I don't know this can happen. So he swallowed water from that pressure, right?
Another huge mistake. That breath was taken under the massive pressure almost 100 feet into the water. So as the two made their way to the surface, the air in his stomach expanded and expanded until his stomach was the size of a basketball. He tried to burp to get the air out, but nothing came out.
And I think because like everything is so compressed and like because of the pressure down there that when you go back up, it expands. And because I'm thinking of these guys that were in that Bell, the saturation divers, the ones that I don't know if they imploded or exploded. I think they exploded. They exploded because they were pressurized with the water that was down there. They're already under the same pressure, I believe. They were pressurized. And so when they depressurized in an instant without going over time, I think they exploded, which was freaking nuts.
By the time they finally surfaced, he screamed out in pain. Don was rushed to the hospital and then immediately into surgery, but in just the few-minute trip to the surface, the air had expanded so much it ruptured his stomach. It would take several weeks in the hospital before he finally recovered, but thankfully, he would fully recover. In the meantime, while Don was in the hospital, another local diver took over the rescue, who'd been involved in several other rescues and had sort of acted as the landlord of Jacob's Well for a period of time. The first thing he did was head down to the last place Don had been to get a better look at the situation. He would end up finding Don's light in the area that Don had gotten stuck and realized that the only way to get into the fourth chamber would be to remove all of the gravel. 2 days later, a bunch of equipment was brought in, including a recompression chamber, a large vacuum, and a series of ropes. Soon enough, a large hose was snaked down to the gravel pile and the removal process began. The hose took care of the smaller debris, while divers placed larger rocks into bags and pulled them up by a rope to the surface. As with before, this was not an easy task. Much of the gravel was replaced basically as it was pulled out, and what was initially expected to be a one-day job quickly turned into a full-week operation. And by the end of the week, tensions had started to rise between city officials and the dive company over the cost of the operation. In just that week's time, it got so bad that rescue operations were eventually halted.
Called it off.
A diver with a camera was then sent down to see the progress that had been made and if the fourth chamber was accessible. When the tape was played back initially, it seemed like after all the effort, they still had nothing, but then they noticed a concentration of fish in a specific spot during one of the frames. After watching it back several times, they were able to make out a tank valve and a regulator, which they thought belonged to either Kent or Mark. But despite locating them, the issues between the dive company and the city were irreconcilable, and 12 days after their fateful dive, the search was called off. Several months later, Don was recovered and anxious to get back into Jacob's Well, but not for recreation. He wanted to make sure that no one else could end up like Kent or Mark.
This was the first survivor where his two friends went inside and he stayed back. So this guy goes back now.
First, he had bags of concrete lowered into the cave, and then over the course of several hours, built a wall over the entrance to the fourth chamber. The wall had a metal grate running through it, which would allow water to continue to flow, but it would ultimately seal the bodies inside. Incredibly, this wasn't a deterrent at all. Just another few months after that, the gate was gone and a note was placed in its place that read, "You can't keep us out."
Isn't that crazy? I think this is the sign. I don't know if he's the one that put up this sign. I think that's what they're referring to. I think I have a picture of the sign here. I don't know if they're referring to this sign. Try to get a close up of it. Daily Star. Okay. Kind of creepy. Sign. Bottomless pit with 300 victims. I don't know if it's 300. And death warning signs drops 140 feet to caves. Stop, prevent your death, go no further. Maddie. So, okay. Yeah, it's pretty creepy ass sign. There's nothing in this cave worth dying for. Don't go beyond this point. It can happen to you. How creepy is that, huh? Dude, I went down this. Oh god, this is tricky. She's probably watching too. Stop, prevent your death, go no farther. Creepy.
And so, as you might imagine, with the gate removed, divers continued to explore Jacob's Well and would continue to push the limits of the deeper sections.
They gotta keep going further and deeper.
4 years after the deaths of Kent and Mark, and 3 years after the gate was installed, 2 members of an advanced diving class held at Texas State University were at the water's edge, pulling on their wetsuits. These 2 guys, Richard and Clark, were well on their way to becoming instructor certified and wanted to complete a dive that was more challenging than open water conditions. Like others before them, they made their way through the first 2 chambers and then across the third and up to the squeeze where the gate had previously been installed. Now, it's not clear if divers had removed the gravel or if the water flowing through the cave had managed to clear it, but either way, by the time Richard and Clark were diving that day, the crevice was widened enough for them to enter. So, the 2 of them pulled off their air tanks and began shimmying backward through the narrow crevice. Richard went through first, and then Clark was going through afterwards, and his tanks got snagged on some rocks. He twisted and pulled, but eventually he had to let them go to join Richard on the other side. When Clark came through without his tank, Richard immediately handed him his regulator, and then the 2 of them started buddy breathing. Unfortunately, this meant that this was basically the official end of their dive. They couldn't really do much exploring if they were buddy breathing, and it was just much safer to come back at a different time when they both had tanks. So they both squeezed their way back through the opening and started making their way horizontally across the 3rd chamber, passing the regulator back and forth as they swam. Then they entered the 2nd chamber, and here's where they made a huge mistake. Another thing about Jacob's Well that makes it so dangerous is that, like other limestone caves, there are tunnels and passages that snake off from the main chambers. That's why it's crucial to use a safety line to ensure you know the way back. In particular, in the 2nd chamber, as you ascend toward the exit, there are 2 passages that look very similar. One of these takes you directly to the 1st chamber and then out, and the other is something known as a false chimney. It ascends almost exactly like the 2nd chamber, but instead of exiting, you hit a roof instead. So as Richard and Clark quickly swam to the surface, sharing the air tank, they accidentally...
So I've heard of this type of stuff happening before too. So this false chimney thing is interesting because there was another cave video that I watched where these people got confused. I forget what kind of, I gotta find out the name again. I forget what they call it. You almost feel like you're drunk or something. You get confused. Underwater. Poisoning. I can't. Somebody's got to know this in the chat, right? What kind of? Okay, nitrogen narcosis. Nitrogen narcosis. I found it. Some people get nitrogen narcosis at certain depths, especially if they don't have the right mix of oxygens and stuff. And you can become confused, make poor decisions. And sometimes too, people, you're going up thinking you're going out your way out, but he actually just went into a crevice. So they get into this thing because it's dark down there. And they get confused, thinking they're on their way out, but then there's a dead end. So they're like, oh shit, where the hell did we go? I've also heard there's been certain cases where, especially if you got that poisoning, that nitrogen narcosis, I've heard that sometimes, the bubbles coming from the tank starts to build up in a little thing like that, in a little wedge like that. And if you look up, that might actually look like the surface to you. And so when you go up there, that's not actually the surface. And then you're confused as shit. And you're like, what the hell is going on?
They swam into that false chimney. Soon enough, they were butting up against the ceiling of the passage, wondering where the exit was. and as they felt around for an exit, not realizing what they had done, and like Don Dibble a few years prior, all of a sudden, pulling air through the regulator felt like pulling air through a straw. Horrifyingly, their only air tank had just run out, still several dozen feet from the surface. Without thinking, Clark just started swimming hard back in the direction they came from, around the bend, into the second chamber, into the first chamber, and then his head shot up through the surface as he gasped for air. Then he spun around and looked back and forth and realized that Richard wasn't with him. He sat on the surface, waiting desperately and looking into the water, but within a few minutes, he knew it was too late. Richard's body was later recovered from inside the false chimney by Don Dibble. Don would even say that this recovery was particularly emotional for him because the two of them were students of the advanced diving class he taught. In class, he always emphasized that cave diving and open water diving are different, and this was a perfect example of why that was the case. But again, despite the numerous tragedies that had taken place at the well, divers continued to dive deeper and push the limits of what was possible, and a select few individuals would actually make it beyond the legendary fourth chamber. On the evening of February 26, 1984, two scuba instructors, John and Danny, and an experienced caver named Wayne, entered the cool water at Cypress Creek. These were experienced and trained individuals, and they had brought all the equipment to make a safe and hopefully groundbreaking attempt. They got through the first chamber and then ran a line from there all the way to the start of the third chamber.
Hey, bird.
They started a new line after that, which went horizontally across the third and halfway into the fourth. Once they were in there, Wayne and John removed their tanks and checked the air pressure, and then Wayne started into the narrow opening of what has come to be known as the fifth chamber.
Fifth chamber. Now we're going in further and deeper. I could not imagine wedging myself in some shit like this. I don't consider myself like a claustrophobic person, but in this shit, I totally would be. I mean, honestly, I don't know. I'm not an extreme claustrophobic person, but even in an elevator, I want to be able to breathe. I don't like being in an elevator where we're all scrunched up together, because then I'm thinking if this shit falls, like I can't even move and shit. We're not gonna be cut. Well, what if we get stuck? You know. But this wedging in between, like, what are you supposed to do? Like move yourself like this and shit, because you can't even. How do you do this?
This fifth chamber is even smaller than the fourth and is more like a tunnel than a chamber. It's just 5 feet wide and 2 feet high, and requires that you push your tanks out.
5 feet wide and 2 feet high, like. So your body, you have to just fucking, like
in front of you as you move through it. As he did this, he unspooled a new line as he went, and then John followed in behind him, taking pictures along the way. At the same time, Danny entered the fourth chamber behind them to maintain the lines as they had discussed prior to entering the cave. He also planned to swim around and explore the fourth chamber and look for a set of tanks left by two divers who had drowned back in 1979. Eventually, John and Wayne made it through the fifth and then into the sixth chamber and out of view from Danny. As far as I can tell, or at least what's available online, this sixth chamber has never been drawn on a map, so it's entirely unclear what it looks like or how big it is. In any case, once they were out of view, Danny got to work scanning the fourth chamber and found that it was more like a small room about 8 feet high and 10 feet wide. Incredibly, he would manage to find the tanks, which he quickly tied to a line, and then he also moved toward the fifth chamber to follow the other two. He pulled his tanks off and squeezed into the narrow passage, but now with the tanks attached to the line, he became acutely aware of just how small the passage was. It was so narrow that he had to stay flat on his stomach, and despite his best efforts, all the movement of him and the tanks was causing visibility to worsen. Then as he continued on, the line started to tangle, and Danny started to get a little bit more anxious about the situation he was in. Took a deep breath, grabbed the line, untangled it, and then pushed himself back into the fourth chamber to wait for the two men instead. In the sixth chamber, Wayne was extending a 100-foot survey tape to try to measure the dimensions of what was turning out to be a large room. John was still waiting around taking pictures, but soon visibility started to get bad in that chamber as well. Despite not being able to see though, John could tell that the sixth chamber was much, much larger. He could easily stand, and he couldn't see how far it extended into the distance. The bottom of it was also muddy instead of rocky like the rest of the cave, making the risk of silting out that much greater. Finally, Wayne came back into view holding the survey tape and signaled to him that it was time to go back. So John turned and followed the safety line back into the fifth chamber, and about midway through came up to a set of tanks that were stuck in the opening. On his way out, Danny had decided to just leave the tanks because they kept getting tangled in the line and caught on the rocks. Then between John pushing and Danny pulling from the other side, they did manage to dislodge the tanks and then continue on. First through the crevice between the third and fourth, and then at around the start of the third chamber, John met up with Danny where visibility was a little bit better. Suddenly, they realized that Wayne was nowhere to be found. At first, John assumed that maybe he was working with a survey tape or getting his tanks back on after moving through the fifth chamber. He hadn't signaled anything to the contrary, and up until a few seconds ago, he seemed to be right behind them. So, the two of them continued on, thinking that Wayne would just join them shortly afterward, and in the meantime, they could start their decompression stops. Then, about halfway through decompressing, there was still no sign of Wayne, and the two of them started to get really worried. At that point, they had basically just enough air to decompress and then exit, so there was no way for them to go back and look for Wayne. As they waited, they just stared off into the dark tunnels, hoping to see Wayne's light off in the distance, but tragically, it never came. The two men eventually surfaced with no idea what happened. Wayne's body was discovered the following day at the entrance to the fifth chamber. His mask was in place, his tank was by his side, and he was lying directly on top of the safety line. To this day, no one knows exactly what happened in his final moments. Hello everyone, welcome to Scare.
Dun, 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 dun. Yo, there was a crazy ass story. Oh my god. Bro. I almost wasn't even going to talk about it because I was going to save this shit, because I even thought about maybe I should do a video on it. Let me see. I said this to myself. There was two crazy stories. Well, one. Shit. Okay. This one real quick. I wanted to show this real quick before I talked about what was going to happen. There's some real crazy shit. This one was this.
As he submerges, the clocks.
This guy's name is Dave.
Now we're in the clear.
David
now
Shaw, and his friend is narrating this video. So David Shaw
running down the line quickly. Everything's going good. Final check. PPO2s are good. Moving down the line. My oxygen levels are right. My computers are good. Passing some of the stage cylinders. Lots of cylinders on this line.
This is David Shaw
Dave's
going
moving
for a
down
dive.
very quickly now.
He's actually going to attempt
He's helping himself
to
go
recover
down,
a body.
running the line very quickly down. Breathing's good. Approach it. There we are on the bottom now, moving along. There's the big thick line from the down line. Okay, now we're coming to the small line which goes off to the body. Okay, Dave's working hard now. He's trying to.
And this guy,
save
Dave Shaw, he broke a record too. Diving records on October 28, 2004. Shaw descended to a depth of 270 meters, which I believe is 880 feet, which is freaking crazy, incredible. Breaking records, depth on the rebirther, depth in the cave of rebirther, depth at altitude on a rebirther, depth running in line. And so this situation here, which I hear he was a really nice guy. This guy is pretty sad. This guy went to go try to recover a body. Shaw recorded his dive with an underwater camera, which allowed researchers to determine that he suffered from respiratory issues due to the high pressure. Shaw ran into difficulties when the body unexpectedly began to float. Shaw had been advised by various experts that the body would remain negatively buoyant because of the visible parts were reduced to the skeleton. However, within his dry suit, Drea's corpse had turned into a soap-like substance called adiporcy, which floats. Shaw had been working with both hands, and so had been resting his can light on the cave floor. Oh, the powerful underwater lights that cave divers use are connected by wires to heavy battery canisters normally worn on the cave diver's waist, or sometimes attached to their tanks. Normally, he would have wrapped the wire behind his neck, but he was unable to do so. The lines from the body bag appeared to have become entangled with the light head, and the physical effort of trying to free himself led to his death. 3 days later, both of the bodies had become entangled in the lines and were pulled up to the surface as the dive team was retrieving their equipment. Shaw's close friend and support diver Don Shirley nearly died as well and was left with permanent damage that impaired his balance. dive that Shaw died on was his 333rd of his career at the time of his world record dive. He had been diving for a little over 5 years. And there's a documentary on YouTube called Dave Not Coming Back, which I think his friend made, actually. I haven't watched it yet. I guess he did it in his name. Dave Not Coming Back. That came out 6 months ago.
Working at the same time. There's the line. This is a line we were worried about being loose, and there it is loose. Okay. We've now come to the end of our time now, and it's time to leave. Dave's decided he's going to leave. All on plan. Everything's right. He's still working hard. Everything's right. He's leaving.
Thank you, Characters Productions. Thank you for the super chat.
Quick check.
Since I watched a great documentary one time on a similar situation as the recent tragedy. I wish I could remember the name of it because they survived.
Gauges are right. Something seems to be stopping him now. And he's caught in the line. Okay. He's working hard trying to untangle himself. You can see the bag. Okay, there he goes. He's moving on again. Now, he's breathing very hard. It's getting quite difficult to do things. Good check on the gauge. Now, Dave's breathing would be getting quite heavy as he's trying to work his way out.
But I guess it became entangled. They weren't expecting this body to be floating.
Dave would start to become incoherent, and then he would stop. But he was still moving out, and he was still working right up to the end. And what he found was he got caught up in the line. He was moving away. The body and everything was actually towing behind him. And he had to then try and untangle himself from that in a very restricted light position with a very high sort of breathing rate.
In today's...
There was a guy that got swallowed by a whale, which is pretty crazy.
He basically succumbed to all the pressures that you've got.
Oh, I got to show you this shit, guys.
And his
this story was crazy.
Slowly faded, and Dave passed away.
Where it starts. So that was a really sad story. I'm gonna play. Let me see. I'm gonna get this one out of the way, and then I'm gonna send something that Kayla sent me. This one here too, I thought was so interesting, yo, and I want to know what you guys think in the chat about this. I'm just gonna play a portion of this video.
In today's
this
video,
by the same guy. This is scary, interesting. Really good story narrator. I like how he does his videos. The video clips and storytelling is really good. So the first clip here was about the guy that got eaten by a whale. Oh, he came out alive though. He was spit out. He didn't really get eaten, but yeah, this was the guy. But then, all right, check out this next story. Check this shit out. Dun, 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 dun.
In October of 2003, 26-year-olds Tina and Gabe had a wonderful wedding in Birmingham, Alabama. For their honeymoon, they wanted to do something adventurous, and so just 2 days after they were married, they hopped on a plane to Sydney, Australia to do some sightseeing. After spending a few days in Sydney, they left for the West Coast, where they planned to go on an excursion with a diving company to dive the historic shipwreck, the Young Gala. On the 21st of October at 10 p.m., they arrived at the coast and boarded the boat that would make an overnight sail to the dive site. By the time it arrived at 2 a.m., the couple was asleep in their bunk.
I was thinking about this last night. Next time I go on a rabbit hole, I should probably just do it on Discord and watch it together. But I can't have interruption. You can't be telling me to watch this, but you have to let me go into the rabbit hole. You know, you got to let me get lost in it. Day.
Then at 9 a.m. on the 22nd, Tina and Gabe joined the crew and the other divers on deck to be briefed about the equipment and the dive route. Tina and Gabe both brought everything they needed except for a set of air tanks that they would get from the excursion crew members. Once they were suited up and ready to go, they hopped into the water with a group of 4 other divers to explore the wreck. But just a few minutes later, they swam back up to the boat because Gabe's dive computer didn't seem to be working right. He ended up pulling the battery out and repositioning it, at which point it started working properly, and then the two of them jumped back in the water. The shipwreck they were exploring was an early 1900s passenger boat that sank off the coast and has since become a popular diving location. It's located near a section of the Great Barrier Reef and rests between 30 and 16 meters deep. This means that it's accessible by recreational divers. After entering the water, the couple planned to travel down the anchor line, then swim across the upper section of the wreck, and then ascend a second anchor line back up to the surface. But moments later, Gabe was back up at the surface, and this time, Tina wasn't with him. Gabe called out asking for help retrieving her, and then one of the crew members jumped into the water to go find her. The crew member eventually found her lying lifelessly along the ocean floor and brought her back up to the boat. Unfortunately, despite trying to resuscitate her for 45 minutes, Tina couldn't be revived. This was obviously an incredibly tragic incident for a couple on their honeymoon. One second they were in love and ready to spend the rest of their lives together, and the next moment they were torn apart. However, upon beginning an investigation into the incident, things started to not add up. First, everyone on the boat was an experienced diver except for Tina. This dive is also known as a red dive because of its difficulty because of the strong current in the water in that area. Red dives are typically only recommended for advanced divers. Investigators questioned Gabe about why they chose to go on this dive and why they had turned down an orientation session, or why they had turned down having a guide with them during their trip. That in itself isn't necessarily suspicious. People are overconfident in their abilities all the time. What was suspicious was Gabe's behavior and his retelling of the events. According to Gabe, the couple realized how difficult the dive was almost immediately upon entering the water. The current was really strong, so Tina signaled to him that she wanted to go back up. Gabe signaled to her to inflate her buoyancy device so that they could float back up, but when she tried to inflate it, nothing happened. Instead, Gabe claims to have grabbed a hold of her and started pulling her, but while doing so, she accidentally knocked the mask off his face. He let go of her to fix it, and then when he could see again, Tina was 10 feet below him and sinking fast. And although she had her arms up trying to reach for him, Gabe couldn't get to her in time. It was at that point that he surfaced and called for help. The problem with this explanation is that not only was Gabe open water certified, but he was also an advanced diver, a rescue diver, and a specialty diver. This meant that it was weird that he wouldn't have been able to help her. He could have helped her inflate her buoyancy device, or after she
so they have buoyancy devices apparently. Which that first kid that we saw, was it Lupa? Something? A scuba tank, buoyancy. The story is so interesting, but it twists a bit. Now you're thinking one thing, right? But then it kind of shifts a bit. But I still think one thing. You're gonna see this shit. It's fucking interesting. Scuba buoyancy device. I just want to see what this looks like. I'm gonna pause a little bit. And this thing is supposed to bring you up. It's like I don't know how it works. I guess it fills up with air, kind of like these maybe the submarines. A buoyancy compensator, also called buoyancy control device, stabilizer, stab jack, wing, or adjustable buoyancy life jacket, depending on the design, is a type of diving equipment which is worn by divers to establish neutral buoyancy underwater and positive buoyancy at surface. And compresses and loses buoyancy as you descend, which is why you use your BCD throughout a dive. Can it lift you? Okay, it inflates or deflates the air of the device, allowing the diver to sink or rise in the water. Okay. All right. So
he wouldn't have been able to help her, a rescue diver and a specialty diver. This meant that it was weird that he wouldn't have been able to help her. He could have helped her inflate her buoyancy device, or after she sank, gone to give her air. What was also suspicious was that there were inconsistencies in each of his retellings of the event. During the investigation, he would also ask to have his dive computer returned to him. This wrist-worn device tracks all the events of a dive, like depth and time. And when police refused to return the dive computer, Gabe got upset and argued with police and even asked for it a second time. It was later revealed that the account he gave seemed to contradict what the dive computer showed. His story also contradicted what other divers had seen that day. Upon examining Tina's body and equipment, the evidence was even more suspicious. It was determined that Tina had drowned, but her regulator was still in her mouth. Her tank was also still completely
That's pretty interesting. Regulator still in her mouth, air tank full. This is a picture from the website. Buoyancy compensator. Okay. It's like around this part here. This is so interesting. Even true crime in the diving world.
With air, and her equipment had no faults. Based on all this information, this is the sequence of events a prosecution would later put forward. After re-entering the water the second time, the couple was seen hugging in the water. It was actually described as though Gabe was bear hugging Tina. It's thought that during the hug, Gabe turned off her air valve and then held her until she suffocated. After that, he turned her air back on and then watched as she sank to the bottom. His dive computer seemed to corroborate this because the ascent that you'd expect would be much quicker than what was actually recorded, indicating that he might have lingered to ensure that she was actually dead.
Anthony, what's up, bro?
In addition to this, supposedly, his dive computer had beeped before changing the battery. This wouldn't have happened had it not been functioning properly. It's thought that he had used this as an excuse to get Tina away from the other divers. The final piece of the story was a motive. Why would a newlywed husband have any reason to get rid of his wife? Why not just not marry her? Well, apparently according to Tina's father, Tina had mentioned to him that shortly before getting married, Gabe had asked her to increase her company's life insurance policy to the maximum amount and make him the sole beneficiary. In Australia, Gabe pled guilty to manslaughter. And
This
was
is so,
sentenced
check this, look how this shit turns out. All right, so he pleads guilty in Australia, right?
12 months.
12 months!
4-year sentence.
But he pleaded maybe
After
not wanting to get the other charge, but he pleaded, I don't know, if you didn't do that shit, I don't know, but he could go back and forth about that. All right, but check it out.
Serving that amount, he was deported to the US, where he was arrested and charged again. However, this case was thrown out by the judge due to a lack of evidence. It was also revealed that the prosecution's own witness, who was a diving expert, had changed his mind in the later stages of the proceedings. New evidence came to light that Gabe's experience was less than what everyone initially thought. The course that Gabe had taken was half the length of a regular course, and he had no rescue experience and almost no open water experience. The diving expert would later say that he had no hope of being competent. He could barely save himself that day, let alone his wife. In fact, Gabe had even required some help getting his equipment on the day of their dive. In the court proceedings, the judge would also block Tina's father from providing testimony about Gabe's supposed request to increase her life insurance policy.
Yeah, messed up. Why? I don't know why.
After his acquittal, a couple years later, in
Check this shit out.
Tina's family noticed that the flowers and gifts they left on Tina's grave kept getting vandalized or disappearing entirely. This kept happening even after chaining the items to the ground. After telling police about these incidents, police recorded a video of Gabe removing the items with bolt cutters and throwing them in the garbage. It was so bad that he was later given a court order to stay away from her grave. But in recent years, in re-examining the case, it seems as though many diving experts are of the opinion that this was simply a case of individuals who should not have been in the position they were in, and their lack of experience ultimately led to a preventable death. However, Gabe's later actions are interesting, to say the least.
I don't know, man. I thought that was so interesting. I'm like, what? So found guilty over there. He got 12 months. He comes over here and they say there's not enough evidence. So he's let go scot-free, but then he's vandalizing her grave. Every time the family's putting things there. I don't know, man. And he asked for, and I wonder if he got that life insurance. I guess he did. Gabe. And you can find the story online. I just looked it up now. Bruh. What's this guy's? Oh, Tina. Okay. Tina Watson had been on her honeymoon with her new husband, Gabe Watson. The honeymoon killer. That's what ABC dubs it as. Gabe Watson breaks his silence. Can we see that? Wait, is there a video? Let me look online. Dun, 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 dun. Bro, I couldn't stop last night. I was just in a dark room listening to all this shit. Honeymoon killer drama. It's 11 years ago. Wow. Oh, look at this. Dr. Todd Grande did a story on this.
A chilling story that will have you wondering, was it love or money? It was an exotic honeymoon that came to a horrifying end 100 feet beneath the ocean's waves. A scuba dive goes terribly wrong. The newlywed bride lifeless on the ocean floor. The groom on the surface, calling for help or guilty of murder. Here's ABC's Elizabeth Vargas for our series, Crime and Punishment.
This home video of a happy newlywed couple packing for their honeymoon in Australia is one of the last images of Tina Watson alive. Their fairy tale wedding behind them, they set off to go diving in the Great Barrier Reef.
She was very excited about her wedding. She always wanted to be the princess bride. She wanted everything just perfect. She had it planned out perfectly.
But 11 days later, Tina was dead. Now, Gabe Watson stands trial in an Alabama courtroom accused of murdering her, with Tina's parents front and center in their quest to find out what really happened to their daughter.
This is about getting justice for our daughter.
Prosecutors began the trial this week by showing jurors this photo of Tina lying lifeless on the ocean floor. As shown in this Australian police reenactment video, the prosecution believes Watson killed his new bride by turning off her air supply on her scuba tank and then holding her in a bear hug while she suffocated. They say he then turned the air back on.
I would have yanked the shit out too. If that was me, I would have fucking started tugging on this shit. You coming with me, pulling all the cords and shit out of it.
What was found, all in under 6 minutes. The defense argues that scenario is impossible and that Tina's death is a tragic accident.
Two inexperienced divers and a perfect storm, a culmination of bad facts and bad circumstances.
I could tell at that point, she was scared before it, but at that point I could tell that, she was frightened.
Today in court, the jury watched a tape of Australian police questioning Gabe about the dive. Gabe says Tina struggled to swim in the strong currents and that she began to sink in the deep water. He says he signaled to her to inflate her buoyancy vest to help her stay afloat, but that she couldn't. He then took her hand and tried to pull her along.
Her hand hit my mask. It knocked my mask sideways. So I had to let go.
Gabe then says he made a fateful
watch
decision.
This shit? They got the whole thing out? I want to see this shit.
To go up to the surface to get help for Tina.
In that split-second decision that he made underwater, at 45, 50 feet of water, with a current in his face, and his wife sinking away from him, he made that decision to go for safety and go for help up on the surface. That decision he has been second-guessed for 9 years.
But prosecutors say Gabe Watson has done more than second-guess his actions that day. They say he's changed his story about what happened several times.
The fact he keeps changing his story, the fact that he's lying.
They argue he planned to kill his new wife, also he could collect on her life insurance policy.
The defendant expected to gain up to $165,000 from Parisian's death benefits.
But it wasn't Gabe who was the beneficiary on Tina's policy. It was Tina's father. Gabe Watson never received a dime. There had been tension between Gabe and Tina's family even before their wedding. They thought Gabe was cool and controlling of their daughter.
I don't think that Tina's mother thought that this was the right guy for her.
Since Tina's death, those tensions have become an all-out war between Gabe and Tina's family. Tina's father fought to have Watson charged with murder in Australia. Gabe Watson did ultimately plead guilty to negligent manslaughter.
Well, the manslaughter standard that he pled guilty to is a very obscure Australian law that says that if you undertake a dangerous activity with someone, you have a significant responsibility.
Why is it my responsibility, though? So it's different in Australia? What? It was
to make sure that they're safe. Not that he killed her, but he didn't do enough to save her.
After spending 18 months behind bars in Australia, Watson returned home, only to face murder charges again.
The state has to show that the defendant caused her death by drowning, that the defendant acted intentionally in causing that death.
Australian journalist and seasoned diver Peter Patrick has been following the case for years. He says there is evidence Gabe's story of what happened could be true, that Tina could have panicked on this deep and difficult dive.
She shouldn't have been diving in that depth of water for her first ocean. I mean, this was the very first time she'd been diving in the ocean, and she chose what's really a fairly significant...
Beauty says he didn't know that dad was the beneficiary.
Diving event.
Gabe and Tina were attempting what's called a drift dive over a century-old shipwreck. Currents are so strong, divers are told not to fight them, but instead to drift over the submerged ship. Patrick has done the dive himself.
It wasn't a Formula One dive, but it was a good run around the racetrack where you needed a lot of skills and you needed to be prepared.
She had just learned how to scuba in an Alabama pond, where her instructor said she also suffered a panic attack even in those calm waters. Divers use more air when they are fighting currents to swim or when they are panicking. Tina's tank showed she had consumed an unusually high amount of air.
I think the evidence.
But that guy in the story told us her tank was full.
Will be consistent with panic and consistent with Gabe's story.
The dive organizers on the reef that day were found guilty of negligence and paid a fine for violating their own safety procedures by letting a novice diver go unescorted into the water. Gabe's defense lawyers say that didn't seem to matter to police. They were so convinced of Gabe's guilt early on, they turned what they saw as his unemotional response into evidence of murder.
When he returned to Alabama, he met with grief counselors.
He was partying.
He attended a young widow and widowers group, a support group. He grieved. He couldn't date. He couldn't interact socially. He was numb, and it took years for him to heal. And he's still emotional when he discusses it.
Two starkly different portraits of Gabe Watson are now on display. Stunned, grieving widower, or a calculating killer who left his new wife dying on the ocean floor. 12 jurors will soon be asked to decide. I'm Elizabeth Vargas for Nightline in New York.
So yeah, he was acquitted. Husband. Oh, the chopper came back? What the hell? Whoa, we're back on the chopper. What's going on here? Where they going? Excuse me. Sorry, I got this cough, this tuberculosis. I was watching Dive Talk last night. Some of the videos I came across was Dive Talk. Okay, hold on. Let me see what before she killed me. Let me Nutty Putty Cave. Let me just try to play one that's not gonna ding me. Oh, we can probably stick with this one.
Oh. In a cave down below, far, far away, he couldn't help himself, and so he proceeded, even though all the warning signs told him, don't go.
Hey there, sorry about that. Yeah, I was linking in. We're climbing. That's the problem right now. We got to get up to a certain altitude, but we're close by.
Where are we going?
Maybe 3 minutes, two or 3 minutes to get to it.
Where we go? All right, let's play this in the meantime, though. This is the story I think you're talking about. Nutty Putty.
What is it about caves that gives you that pit in your stomach?
It's exhilarating.
Is it the darkness, the tight squeezes, or just how easy it seems to get lost forever? In today's video, we're going to go over 3 stories that I think truly highlight all of the reasons why we find caves to be terrifying. As always, viewer discretion is advised.
Which one's Nutty Putty?
Indiana is the state's 4th longest cave, Sullivan Cave. With a total mapped length of almost 10 miles, the cave is owned and managed by the Karst Conservancy and is not an ordinary tourist cave despite its size. Groups wanting to explore it have to apply to enter and are recommended to be expert or advanced cavers because of its difficulty. Because of its size as well, the tunnels are not well lit. You have to have all of the proper equipment like lights and padding to explore safely. Sullivan Cave has been known about since at least the 1800s because of markings that have been found in a room known as Backbreaker. This is a room that is essentially just a narrow tunnel to stay warm. He was getting so hungry that he even considered eating the cricket. It was a sure he could find. Then in the evening bars, and he had already second day and battery first at 48 hungry. Initially, the happened would spend both his garbage that he had with him. Infantry in the club in there. They're located. First explored in 1941 by expert caver Bob Leakey. The Mossdale Caverns are located in Yorkshire Dales National Park in England.
That's not it.
This limestone cave system contains over 10 kilometers.
Trying to find the one. I think it's in this one. Most replayed part.
For around a quarter of the total mineral province in South. Gauteng is a province in South.
No, I'm trying to find that one. I just wanted to be safe with what I use. Okay, Nutty Putty, 2005.
he freed at some point in time today?
Freed is a relative term, Shauna. He was pulled back a little bit to a more comfortable position where he was in more of a horizontal position, but there was still 16 feet of that tight tunnel he was stuck in for him to get out of before he would be truly freed and be able to leave the cave. Now, a piece of equipment broke at that time. He has since slid back into that original position with his head down at a 60 or 70 degree angle, so a very uncomfortable spot, and rescuers very worried tonight. The sun went Wednesday, and the Utah County Search and Rescue Team still surrounded the mouth of Nutty Putty Cave. Inside, 26-year-old John Jones had been stuck since 9 o'clock Tuesday night.
Being stuck in that position for going on 23 hours now makes it very difficult for him.
Only a single rescuer can get in the space called Bob's Push, an area only 18 inches wide and maybe 10 inches high. Jones' brother saw him enter the passage while they explored.
He'd worked himself face forward through a series of tight passes, and he'd gotten himself to a point where he couldn't back up.
It's now been about 22 hours since John Jones became stuck in that hole inside the cave. Just recently, they've been trying to figure out a way to have him communicate with his family by radio.
Have the family have a chance to talk to him, sort of boost his spirits a bit.
Rescuers say Jones is exhausted. They were able to pull him to a more comfortable position for a short period of time and even provided him with food and water. But then equipment failed.
That's the guy that was in the shipwreck?
They started.
Still far from being a recovery. It's a rescue. But the longer it goes, obviously, the more concern there is.
He will be unable to help them with his own rescue. And that.
Are they starting to get a little bit worried about all this?
They're very worried about him. He's in the cave, and it's quite comfortable in this particular cave, we're told. The temperature is somewhere around 68 degrees, but you're still in a very uncomfortable position. In fact, Sergeant Spencer Cannon described it like this. As you're going through that, you have one arm up, one arm down, and this man is about my size. He's around 200 pounds and 6 feet tall, so a very large guy, and he's in this.
Being stuck in that position for going on 23 hours now makes it very difficult for him.
On the 24th of November, 2009, John Jones, a 26-year-old medical student and devout family man, was back home in Utah with his pregnant wife and their young daughter for the holidays. During the stay, he and a group of 10 other friends and family members arranged a trip down to the Nutty Putty cave system. This was a supposed beginner's cave, located near the family's home in Salt Lake City. But the trip would quickly turn into a hellish nightmare, causing one of the most unusual and arguably terrifying deaths in caving history, leading to the Nutty Putty caves being sealed shut forever. This is the story of the Nutty Putty cave incident. Be warned, this is not a story for those with claustrophobia. The Nutty Putty caves, first explored in 1960, were notorious for their narrow and slippery passageways, twists and turns. The cave system is accessible by a narrow hole, just 30 inches wide, and was reported to be an extremely popular beginner's cave, welcoming anywhere from 5,000 to 25,000 visitors a year. But after a series of high-profile rescue missions between 1999 and 2004, the cave's safety was widely and publicly called into question. All of these incidents involved people becoming stuck in the smaller passageways of the cave, including a 23-year-old man who became stuck for more than 7 hours, just meters away from the place where John Jones would find himself trapped. In another incident...
I wonder what is the allure of the caves and stuff? I guess exploring and something? My mother, she was in the Dominican Republic recently with my family, and she told me there was this cave that they went in, and like when they went into this cave, then there's like this water part that you get on a boat and it takes you to the other side. But she said it was like, I don't know, like 20 or 30 feet deep or something like that. And so she was like that. She was kind of like a little nervous because like, I don't know, it just kind of like, because I was like, because I know my mother doesn't know how to swim. So I was like, oh, did you have lifeguard? I mean, life jacket? And she's like, oh, well, they had it on the side. I was like, but if it falls, people don't know how to swim. How are they going to use it? So she felt kind of like nervous and anxious about this cave, but I guess she went out and they went over to the other side. But that's how it is in DR probably. I'm sure they don't have too many safety measures over there. They got that shit on the side of the boat. So if you fall, hopefully maybe you can grab one or something Maybe they probably don't even have enough. Whoever grabs it first, type of shit, right? 2 out of 4, type of shit.
A local teenager became stuck upside down for an entire night before he could be rescued. Because of these high-profile incidents,
And I can't lie, I have that exploration type of thing in me too, but I couldn't see myself going into a cave like this. I do want to go to the Everglades, to that abandoned rocket facility where there was like 2 or 3 bodies found dead. I want to go there.
2006, the Nutty Putty cave entrance was gated and inaccessible, and for several years, local cavers, or spelunkers as they're known in the US, would battle local authorities who were threatening to close the cave for good. Officials stated that the caving system was a ticking time bomb, and that it was only a matter of time before somebody was killed. But local spelunking groups argued that shutting the cave down would be unfair to serious cavers, and that people should take more responsibility for their own safety. It's apparent from the comments and letters written into local papers that some people felt extremely passionate, even indignant, about its potential closure. One letter to Utah's oldest newspaper demonstrates this, reading, "I'm tired of the government deciding it knows what is best for us."
Tired of government intervention. I mean, I guess if people want to go down this hell shit, I mean, I guess you gotta, even with the Stockton thing, he purposely, wasn't the company like founded or whatever, operated or founded in the Bahamas or something purposely, and also that location was in the international waters, so nobody could really tell him shit. But anyway, this was, I guess these people feel the same way. We're tired of government intervention. If we want to go exploring and doing all kinds of shit, but at the same time, these people expect you to drop everything and rescue, which you should, it's obligation, but they also, want you to fucking run there and do all this kind of saving shit.
Nutty Putty Cave has been a fun spot for me. Both of my sons now love going to that cave. I hope somebody can tell me how many people
Both of my
have been
sons
hurt
now love going to the cave. I wouldn't be taking my daughter there.
or killed. I haven't heard of any. Possibly a sign telling of the risks involved should be placed by the cave so that we as Americans can decide for ourselves what is best. As the war waged on, finally, in September 2007, the caves were officially closed to the public while a new volunteer management team was put in place. This was a last-ditch attempt to prevent the cave's complete and permanent closure. And then, finally, in March 2009, the Nutty Putty Caves reopened with a brand new cave management plan. The new plan enforced a process which required would-be spelunkers to apply for a permit 21 days before their visit.
The hell's a spelunker?
And agree to follow certain safeguarding procedures, such as having a minimum of 2 people per visiting group that were, and I quote, experienced cavers. And so, it was under these circumstances that 26-year-old John Jones and his then 23-year-old brother, Josh Jones, plus 9 other members of his friends and family entered the Nutty Putty Caves on the 24th of November, 2009. When the group entered the cave at 8 p.m. local time, they would have been confident.
Nutty Putty.
Whilst John and his brother had not visited the Nutty Putty Caves before, they had spent much of their childhood exploring Utah's caves. In fact, as a small boy, John had more than once acted as a trapped victim for the Utah Cave Rescue Team, a group his father had helped found. But the reality was that John and his brother hadn't been spelunking in years, and there is a great deal of debate as to whether John and his brother could act as experienced cavers on behalf of their group. Nonetheless, for the first hour, everything went well, as the party explored the largest room in the cave, called the Big Slide. It was at this point that his brother Josh and their 2 friends challenged each other to go further on into the next part of the cave, taking on one of the most difficult to navigate areas, known as the birth canal. This part of the cave is so tight that only a few people can actually access it. Eventually, the birth canal passageway opens up into a small room. Several people had become stuck in the
there's nothing about this that seems alluring to me, adventurous, like exciting. To be wedged, like literally trying to squeeze yourself, pulling yourself. And then it reminds me, now makes me think of that chamber thing we're watching, that Texas Jacob's Well or whatever. These people, I mean, this space is a little bit tighter, I think, but not that much tighter. It's underwater, squeezing with scuba tanks.
Birth canal previously, but John, a fit, healthy, and slender man in his prime, wasn't worried. Heading through the passageway first, with his brother behind him, John wriggled on just his stomach down what he thought was the entrance to the birth canal. But John, unknowingly, had taken a wrong turn down an unmapped passageway via a route known as the Corkscrew, a place where only the smallest and most flexible of cave explorers could fit. As John pushed forward, the passageway became tighter and tighter, and he became unable to turn back on himself.
That's what I was about to say. How do you even go back? Like, if you need to go back, how do you go back?
When he saw what looked like a small opening at the end of the crawl space, he continued on, with hopes of being able to turn around. Unfortunately, this is where things took a turn for the worse, because John was crawling head first into a 10 by 18 inch fissure that dropped straight down. Worse still, John had sucked in his chest to slide past a lip of rock to get into the fissure, meaning that when his chest expanded again, he became completely trapped in an area the size of a small, front-loading washing machine. John made several attempts to free himself. It was no use. It was at this point that he began calling for his brother. When Josh finally found John, for a split second,
and if he was there by himself, nobody would know. So he's in a dead end, I guess?
This would be a silly story to tell later on that evening, but as he examined the situation more closely, dread settled in. Josh made several desperate attempts to free his brother, but none of them worked. In fact, he had made the situation worse. John had slid further down into the passage and was now completely upside down, with both of his arms pinned to his side, unable to move at all. It was at this point that the two brothers realized that they needed help. Josh alerted the rest of the group and left a friend to stay with John as he rushed out of the cave system to a nearby hill to get reception and call 911. Knowing help was on the way, he went back down into the cave where his brother was still pinned upside down. It would be 3 hours before help would arrive. At 12:30 a.m., the first rescuer arrived on the scene. It was Susie Matola, a local volunteer who immediately rushed to the scene when she received a message on her pager. Right away, Susie realized that John's predicament was much, much worse than she had thought. She knew she had to keep John calm, and so she greeted him and told him that he'd be out in no time, and not to worry, to which John replied, "Hi, Susie. Thank you for coming, but I really, really want to get out." Susie tried absolutely everything she could think of to pull John out, including cutting off part of his jeans to free up some space, but after 2 hours, Susie was exhausted and unsuccessful. She was forced to crawl back up to the surface where, at this point, both his wife and his daughter and around 30 rescuers had arrived on the scene. There, a very concerned but calm group were brainstorming plan after plan. They discussed everything from breaking John's legs to lubricating the walls with several gallons of oil. But eventually, they decided upon a
his legs. And I know I saw Harry. I think you were saying that kind of joking, but I guess they were seriously talking about lubing him up, pulling out of there. I think this guy dies, though. I'm not sure. I don't know.
System of ropes and pulleys to hoist John out, legs first. This pulley system would be aided by drilling some of the rock around him to create more space. Members of the rescue team made their way to John with the equipment, but they ran into problems. The rock wasn't coming away quickly enough, and removing what did come away from the wall was proving impossible to do safely, not least of which because the rock was falling back down onto John. Back at the surface, the rescue team, now in their hundreds, were all becoming increasingly concerned. Things were moving slowly. Each trip to pass a piece of gear to John's location, 700 feet deep within the cave, took an hour, and only one person could ascend or descend down the passageway at a time. To make matters worse, when rescuers told on-site trauma surgeon Doug Murdoch that John was upside down, Doug made the team aware that this likely meant that John would only have 10 hours before his organs would fail. The human body is designed to be upright. The heart works with the force of gravity, and if it can't, blood and fluids quickly begin to pool in the brain and lungs.
I always wonder what happens if somebody's held like that. You know, you see in the movies, they tie somebody upside down or whatever. And I never really thought that, I don't know, you could just die from just being left upside down. But I guess that makes sense. So the blood rushes to increase intracranial pressure, excessive salivation, cardiac failure, blood pools in lungs and brain. Which, by the way, the other day I was like, I felt a little nauseous the other day when because I'm a little sick. It was one morning when I woke up and, my mouth started like hyper salivating, which, You know, I've experienced that in the past. But then I started wondering, like, why does this do that? Like, why does your body do that shit? And apparently it's like to lubricate your throat, I think, and your stomach, or is it your throat and your mouth from like the stomach acid? Why do you hyper salivate? Is that a word? Yeah, hyper salivate when you throw up. Our digestive process starts in the mouth with the saliva, which is high amylase, an important digestive enzyme that helps break down carbohydrates. So as part of the digestive process triggered by whatever may be causing nausea, we have increased salivation. Plenty of water. I read somewhere it's to protect your mouth and throat and stuff. Doesn't say that now. I don't know, I was gonna say that now. That's what I read the other day, that helps like protect your shit.
And eventually, it becomes extremely difficult to breathe. On top of this, the heart begins to work overtime, and it becomes increasingly difficult to pump blood around the body, which can lead to cardiac arrest. This was something Susie noticed within the first hour of working to free John, a distinct rattling noise coming from his chest, a clear sign that fluid was pooling in John's lungs. He was already starting to asphyxiate. The rescue team decided that the immediate goal should be to get John out of his dangerous position to alleviate the pressure on his lungs. The team got to work immediately to install the first system of ropes and pulleys, but they quickly ran into several problems. John's legs and feet couldn't bend back around the curve of the shaft he had slipped into. On top of this, the lip of rock that he had breathed in to slip past was catching on his chest. It was, as one official put it, the worst possible place to be stuck. Nonetheless, the team managed to hoist him up enough to elevate his position slightly and administer IV. Unfortunately, just moments later, this first pulley system failed, and John slid back down into his original spot. At this point, John was swinging in between a state of calm and panic, and so a decision was made to bring a two-way cable radio into the cave so that John could speak with his wife. The conversation was tense, but it did serve to keep him calm enough for the next system of ropes and pulleys to be installed. Finally, after 19 hours, a team of 8 were ready to pull. But there was a problem. Each pull was agonizing for John, and the team had to pause several times to avoid breaking his leg.
I just see you guys talking shit. You don't know how many people within the last hour, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different people I don't want to say blow me up, but text me. I'm not going to put their names up. So when I'm streaming, I can't sit and read every single word and like take time to do long. I'm streaming. So I try to reply when I can. I can't read every single message. Okay. So please don't take offense. I'm tired of like people fucking getting upset about that.
And then a glimmer of hope. On the third pull, John was lifted up high enough to make eye contact with his rescuer, who later commented that his eyes were red, his face was dirty, but that he seemed fine otherwise. When the rescuer asked him how he was, John said, "It sucks. I'm upside down. I can't believe I'm upside down. My legs are killing me." The rescuer saw that even though John was complaining, he had a smile on his face. And then, on what was to be the fourth pull, disaster struck.
That they have a raising system that was helping to hold him in position. One of the devices as part of that system failed, and Mr. Jones actually ended up falling back into the area where he had been stuck for so long.
The system had failed. The entire team fell backwards. When the team regained composure, they realized that the worst thing imaginable had happened. A bolt that was drilled into one of the cave's walls had come out, causing part of the cave to crumble.
Shit.
This had hit the lead rescuer in the face, causing him to momentarily black out. And worst of all, John had slid back down into the crevice and had now become completely unresponsive.
Wow.
With the rescuer closest to John now needing medical attention, a second lead rescuer took his place. Satisfied that John was, in fact, still breathing, in a state of desperation, the new rescuer somehow managed to slip a rope around John's waist. But he himself became stuck, and needed help from other members of the team, sustaining multiple injuries in the process. A third lead rescuer made a last-ditch attempt to free John by desperately drilling away the rock around him, but it was no use. The entire team was exhausted. John was barely breathing and was still unresponsive. He had gone into cardiac arrest, and tragically, there was nothing anyone could do. It was at this point that John's wife Emily was informed of the situation. John was technically alive, but unconscious. In her desperation, she believed that he could still survive the ordeal and continue to radio down. In one of her final communications with John, she said, "I know you've been pushing so hard for so long. Why don't you rest for a minute and take a break, and then you can push again?" At this point, whilst they couldn't officially confirm it, rescuers suspected the worst. And so, a brave paramedic was sent down to take a pulse, confirming what everyone had suspected. At 11:56 p.m. on the 25th of November 2009, John Edward Jones was pronounced dead 28 hours after he had initially become stuck. Emily was initially in complete disbelief. She refused to believe that her husband could die from such a simple mistake and did not accept that a pulse taken from the leg could indicate that he was dead. Eventually, officials managed to calm her down, agreeing that they would do everything in their power to remove her husband's body from the cave. Not wanting to let a grieving widow down, the team discussed what was reported to be some rather distasteful plans to get John's body out, but this would prove to be impossible. Even if they were able to free John, his lifeless body would not be able to twist properly in order to be fully removed from the cave, at least not intact. It was decided, given everything that had transpired, that it was simply too dangerous for the rescue team to attempt to remove his body. And so, a decision was made to seal the entrance of the cave with concrete, with John's body inside, forever.
Wow.
John's family had a plaque installed on the entrance of the cave in his memory. Later, the family would release a statement where they said that John Edward Jones, husband, father, and pediatric cardiologist in training, would be remembered for his, quote, good nature, delightful sense of humor, strong work ethic, a genuine love of people, a masterful ability to relate to children, a love of and unwavering faith in the gospel of Jesus Christ, and his commitment to his family as an amazing husband, father, son, and brother. To this day, John's remains are still inside the cave, serving as a harrowing reminder of the very real risks of cave exploration. This is the real...
Crazy story. All right, I think I'm going to do one more. And just so you guys understand, too, I can't... they're like, I run into copyright issues too, so like I try to be, we'll play some videos, but I try to be careful. Like for some reason the shrimp piston video that get copyright claimed, so I can't sit here and just play a bunch of videos, not pause, not get some people get upset if I don't pause, all that kind of stuff. I have to pause and stuff. So, but this type of thing is probably better for like Discord. One day if we do a Discord stream, I have to have rabbit hole. I don't know what sounds good. Rabbit Hole Mondays, Rabbit Hole Fridays, Rabbit Hole Sundays, Rabbit Hole Tuesdays. I don't know. I guess it goes all together. Kitty says, thank you for the super chat and for the 5-month membership. Says Harrison Okini. Look it up. Let's see.
Harrison Oken was working as a cook on a tugboat called Jackson 4. It had set off
More
from the
uplifting
coast
stories?
of Nigeria and was working in the icy waters of the Atlantic Ocean. The job of a tugboat is to tow other sea craft across the ocean to their destination, because they can't maneuver over the waters on their own. In Oken's case, his tugboat was one of 3 crafts set out to bring an oil rig back to land. Far out into the deep waves of the Atlantic Ocean, it's not unusual to hit rocky waters or a bit of stormy weather. It's part and parcel of working on a boat out at sea, sometimes for many weeks. Some days you will drift along with relative ease, and on others you feel truly at the mercy of the elements. So when this particular storm hit in May 2013, Oken and his crew had no idea just how much destruction it was going to wreak. That day, Oken awoke in the early hours of the morning and headed to the bathroom to freshen up. It was when he was in the bathroom that it happened. Something hit the tugboat, a large wave, a gust of wind, who knows? But it was the vessel's
it's back again. There's something called rogue waves as well out in the ocean that supposedly has been known to like flip ships.
Final blow. He barely had time to think before the icy waters began sucking the tugboat into its depths. He couldn't see anything, but he knew that the ship was in serious trouble. He tried to scramble out of the bathroom and towards his fellow crew members. But nothing could prepare him for what he would see next.
No problem, Alec.
The force of the waves rocking the boat meant that he couldn't get to the emergency exit hatch, but he could see some of his colleagues inching closer to it. As everyone attempted to clamber their way to the exit hatch, a huge swell of water burst into the ship and swept through it. He could only watch in horror as 3 of his colleagues were sucked out into the black depths. It's hard to imagine the force of the waves that were sucking this once powerful tugboat deep into the ocean. He had no time to grieve for what he had just seen as he was thrown about the ship as it continued to plummet. He turned away from the exit hatch and was immediately swept up by another violent wave, but instead of being pulled out to sea, he was thrust down another of the ship's passageways. In the darkness, he had no idea where he was being pulled or what he would find there. Then, with a deafening crash, the staggering descent of the ship stopped as suddenly as it had started.
That was a good movie, The Perfect Storm.
He slowly realized that he had been swept by the surging water into another toilet, near to one of the other cabins. Water continued to surge and pummel the tugboat on the outside, but the inside seemed to have stopped moving. He had no idea what was happening, but he realized one thing with astonishment. He was still breathing. He couldn't understand it. Was he really at the bottom of the ocean? What had happened? Where were his colleagues? Were they all right? Had anyone survived, or were some of them trapped like him? The tugboat had overturned completely and was now sitting upside down at the bottom of the seabed. Incredibly, he seemed to be in some sort of small air pocket, preserving a precious space where he could still breathe. He realized that he was alive, and he could still breathe in this small air pocket, but he wasn't sure what to do next. He tried calling out for his colleagues, peering into the darkness for any sign of them, but there was nothing. Stuck in the tiny toilet, with water slowly but steadily trickling in, he looked around for things to climb onto to keep his head out of the water. He found an overturned wash basin and clung to that to propel himself a little higher. But this wouldn't last. He needed to find something else to climb on, and fast. As terrifying as it was, he had to leave his tiny toilet and see if there was anything else nearby that he could use to build height. He finally built up the courage to open the door and managed to swim into the adjacent cabin. From there, he was able to pull off parts of the wall paneling. He piled up the paneling to create a sort of makeshift raft and managed to lift himself further out of the icy water. There was nothing else to do now but wait and pray for a miracle. There was another reason that he needed to stay still after building this raft. Not just out of fear of dislodging another great swell of ocean water, but to preserve the oxygen in his own body. Any form of exertion causes you to breathe more heavily, and he was aware of the limited oxygen in his tiny air pocket. He stayed as still as possible and tried to regulate his breathing. But even this wouldn't be helpful for much longer. The truth is that even if he had remained completely still and meticulously rationed his breathing, oxygen would eventually become too scarce. At these sorts of depths in the ocean, the oxygen levels are incredibly low and are quickly overtaken by the nitrogen levels. Oken did everything he could to cling to life. Lost and alone in the darkness, freezing cold, and with the water levels slowly rising. He had no food, no water, but he did manage to find a small bottle of Coke. But he had more to worry about than a lack of food or water. Already incredibly uncomfortable from the freezing salty water and struggling without anything to eat or drink, something else started to affect him. After being in the harsh salt water for a long time, his skin began to peel off in painful flakes. Even though things seemed utterly hopeless, the devout Christian clung to his hope in God, praying again and again that he be saved. It was clear that for Oken to survive, he would truly need some kind of miracle. Fortunately, this was something that he believed was completely possible, even in the darkest of times. As well as his faith in God, Oken kept himself sane with thoughts of his life and family back home. Thinking of them gave him renewed strength to keep fighting and believe that a miraculous rescue could be just around the corner. 60 hours had now passed since the tugboat had crashed into the seabed, and he was still clinging to life, way down there at the bottom of the ocean. Suddenly, he thought he heard a faint hammering on the deck. Was this all in his mind? Or was salvation truly at hand? Oken's desperate hope was true, in a manner of speaking. There was indeed a search team of divers circling the wreck of the tugboat. But they were not there to look for survivors. It was so impossible for anyone to possibly survive down in these depths that the search team had merely been sent to recover the bodies. Dutch company DCN Diving had already found 4 bodies and was certainly not looking for survivors. The team went deeper into the murky boat, using their headlamps to shine light into the dark water. As the divers swept through the corridors, Oken could see the light from one of their head torches passing him. Oken was desperate to attract his attention, but he was so exhausted he could barely lift his arms. Miraculously, for some unknown reason, the diver returned to the same spot. Oken was more terrified now than ever before. He knew he had to muster all his strength and not let this moment go by. Weak from days without food or water, Oken had to use the last of his remaining energy to swim towards the diver. He still could not get his attention, so he reached out and tapped him on the back of the neck. The video footage from the search team's cameras shows the incredible events that happened next. Once the diver spotted Oken's hand reaching out, he turned to his microphone, reporting to the rescue ship above. "Corpse, corpse, corpse," he called. But then he realized how very wrong he was. As the diver approached to touch the dead hand, it touched him back.
That's gotta be freaky as shit.
You can hear the amazed reaction of the rescue team in the live video footage. "He's alive? He's alive!" they exclaimed in shock.
"He's alive! He's alive!"
When the search team realized they had discovered a survivor, they were overjoyed at this unprecedented miracle. It was an astonishing result for everyone, not just because they completely hadn't expected it, but because it truly was impossible that someone could survive in those conditions. Even though he had now been discovered, there was still a way to go before he could be safe. The rescue team was worried that the excitement of being rescued would cause him to panic and hyperventilate. They weren't just concerned about
how much
his feelings,
oxygen you got left in there,
but because he had been in such a nitrogen-high environment, it was likely that he had absorbed potentially lethal amounts. Raising your heart rate while in this state is incredibly dangerous and can be fatal. So for the rescue team, keeping Oken calm was literally a matter of life or death. Fortunately, the rescue team, both under the water and above in the search panel, were incredible at keeping Oken calm and positive and talking him through the rescue process. The diver's video footage is incredibly emotional, showing the team leader talking calmly and kindly to Oken, putting him at ease. Although he had been rescued, it wasn't as straightforward as simply taking him back up to the surface.
You gotta stop.
Having spent so much time in the pressurized container, his heart had slowly filled with gas, meaning that it was no longer able to cope with the air conditions above the water. The return of Oken to the surface and the outside world had to be done in several separate careful stages. First, the rescue team strapped him into diving equipment, including a mask to help him breathe underwater. Then they led him through the water into a diving bell.
Oh, the diving bell. There you go. That's the bell I was talking about in the beginning.
Turned him to the surface, but he had to go immediately into a decompression chamber. Oken spent 2 days in the chamber, where his heart eventually returned to normal levels. Soon enough, the miraculous survival and rescue story of Harrison Oken spread around the world. Readers and experts all over the world were amazed and moved by the miracle, which had never happened before. Some hypothesized that it was the chemical makeup of the water that he was partially submerged in. The water could have helped absorb the otherwise potentially dangerous levels of nitrogen and carbon dioxide that arise in a concealed space over a long period of time.
The poison helped him.
Okay.
Became one with the poison.
Found one, yeah? He's alive, he's alive. Okay, keep him there, keep him there. All right, just, all right, just hold him there, okay? Just keep him there. All right, just keep him there and keep him calm, okay? All right, just reassure him, pat him on the shoulder.
Oh.
Okay. All right.
Bro, he's like, what the fuck? You suck.
All right. All right, let's get that head on his head so we can reduce the CO2, please. Just want you to keep calm, okay? Are you feeling okay? Are you sore? Have you got any injuries? Okay. What's your name? Harrison. Okay, Harrison. My name is Colby. Okay, and I'm going to bring you home, okay? And the driver that's helping you now, his name is Nico. Okay, that's Nico, okay? You mustn't take your hat off, okay? You must just breathe nicely, yeah? Okay. All right, let's go. You hold your umbilical and you listen to me, okay? All right, we're going now. Put your head underwater and breathe comfortably, okay?
Wow. Amazing. Let me see something. Beauty, thank you so much for the super chat. Says, my daughter, 9, said, tell your friend daughter I said hi and I'll teach her how to draw. Thank you for the super chat. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. I think there was one more video on this guy that I wanted to see real quick. Here. Gotta take some more medicine.
In May 26, 2010.
Let's see. Let's check up how he's doing now. This was 9th year after 3-day shipwreck. All right, let's check it out. Hold up.
My name is Harrison Kene. In May 26, 2013, I was involved in a shipwreck in Nigeria that took place. And I was really survivor among 11 of us. And today, making it 9 years that I was involved in the incident. And today I find myself diving in the same company that came for the rescue in Nigeria.
Oh, he's diving for them?
The SAR diving operation. And today I found myself working with them as a diver.
Okay.
In the same field, and they were working at the moment ahead of the incident. They came for the rescue. And today I'm with them working. And I'm with them working. And today make it 9 years of my incident. I'm just like, I don't know what to say, but today they were all happy seeing me on board, strong, sound and healthy, diving, feel free walking. Oh, it's just like a family again. So I was very, very happy today. I just thank God for his strength. Keeping me alive, giving me a second chance in life to be a better person, to be a hardworking person, to know every reason why God kept me alive, and for me to know someday I might be a rescuer to someone else in life as well. But God knows the best. I thank God for everything. And today I'm happy working in the same company, the same project, a different project, but the same field, the same subsea SPM hose installation. And I was very happy. And they were so happy seeing me diving, doing the job that they were doing then when I was a cook. And they were happy for me as a fast learner today for being on board, diving. They were shocked. And they were telling me, you're so brave today. We saw you diving. And you are diving, you don't stop diving. You are a strong diver. Thank you and God bless. I will stop pushing because the incident that happened to me would have been a showstopper to me, because after the incident, I told myself I would not come back to the sea again. But I never allowed that to happen to me, because I told myself it can be a showstopper to me. It can stop me from my dream. It can stop me from my future. But I decided to move ahead, to leave those things that happened to me behind and move ahead. And today, I think of the story every time, but I give thanks to God. But I don't let kids weigh me down or pull me back. I keep pushing to be a better person in the future, and to get to the upper level of diving tomorrow. That I will be telling the younger divers about my story, what's happened to me, what's my history all about. And thank God for this thing. Thank you all, and God bless.
Okay. I guess it's doing good. Be careful diving back down there in the sea now. 10 years after surviving.
Hi, Harrison O'Kenny. I completed my 10 years of survivor in the ocean because I'm always diving. I'm always in the ocean diving. So I was there when it became 10 years, and I was so excited, so grateful to God for additional 10 years to my years after surviving, and I'm happy. And I'm also happy by the grace of God by being strong, keeping myself going in life.
I'd be thankful too if I survive some shit like that. That's crazy. All right. Well, I guess that's it for tonight, man. Unless there's a chase. I was working on something, but I guess I don't even know if I'm gonna finish it tonight. Probably not. I don't know. At some point, I would like to finish this other video that I'm working on. But yeah, I'll be around if there's a chase or some type of breaking news. I'm working on a pre-recorded video, and I'm still a little like, I don't know, just like congested, like my throat kind of thing, and this like cough or whatever. So, but and I wasn't planning on being on 2 hours. I just wanted to watch a little bit of the fire stuff. But then I remembered all this stuff that I was watching last night. The rabbit hole that I went down, and it was a lot of fun. But I was up to like 4 a.m, man. I was like, bro, this is crazy. So, but yeah, you guys have a good night. Take care. Hopefully we get a good chase. All right, take care. Peace. Bye. Adios. Bloop, bloop, bloop.